Good morning, Andrew. Good to.
Hiya, you're right, Andy.
I'm good. Yeah.
Awesome. I blogged.
Bang. There we go. And it's a real pleasure to have with us Ulrik Christensen of Area 9 Lyceum, talking us through, well, we're going to share a conversation about AI and the impact of a lot of stuff that, well, has suddenly risen to the surface. We've seen some of it, particularly in consumer grade stuff in the past couple of weeks, but there's a longer tail to it than that. And I'd just like to Ulrik, very quickly, before we kick off, can you just give us some of your background? Because I think not everybody will know who you are and your background. It'd be very useful to get some of that. Then let's talk into why this is so important now, this shift in emphasis in the talk about AI. But Ulrik, let's talk about you to begin with.
Sure. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Ulrik Christensen. I'm the CEO of Area 9. I was originally a physician who got interested in human factors, and that led to trying to do something about it. How do we build education that leads to better performance, and how do we build systems that are safer? I am wildly passionate about one area of high performance, high reliability, which is scuba diving, even in the more extreme forms. But I've been studying like high performance situations like pilots and astronauts and special forces for about 30 years now. I am particularly interested in how do we impact things at scale, and how do we use a research-based approach to drive innovation. So while you might have heard about many of our colleagues out there, we typically behind the scenes in some of the larger players' technologies.
And you've been doing this, you've been using, I'm going to use the word AI, it's often misused, but I'm going to use the word AI. Well, you're using AI in the background for supporting learning for a long time, right?
Yes, and we use different kinds of technology in AI, where like you probably have to expand the normal perception of AI a little bit to get it to include the kind of biological models we use for adaptivity. But one of the largest breakthroughs we've made, and that's actually an almost 15-year-old breakthrough before the modern wave of AI really started a few years ago. But that was a breakthrough in the kinds of intelligence you need to make learning systems work. And also to do it at scale, so that you're not dependent upon subject by subject to build subject-specific AI, but you're actually able to make breakthroughs like the GPT-3 or the Chat GPT has been in language-based and that kind of those kind of areas that we've been able to make similar ones in education in the past.
So, you mentioned Chat GPT there. It's the chat engine side of GPT-3, which we've seen. We will touch on that, but before, and I know that that's something that's caught everybody's attention recently. Before we delve into that, can we just talk about when we were discussing this recently? We had a conversation, and we were talking about there's been a shift actually. Moving away from AI just for a second, been a shift in the importance of learning generally. You've just finished a chapter, haven't you, in a book on workplace learning? And when we were talking, you said, look, we can't pretend anymore. We can't pretend whether it's working or not. It is visible, it is evident, and it's important that it is working. Do you want to expand on that a bit so we can set the scene for why, never mind AI, workplace learning itself is very important right now?
Yes, it's interesting because it's probably 10 years ago we first started talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and there are some people ringing the alarm bell saying that 1.5 billion jobs will go away, and nobody really took it seriously. Well, that's not true. Some people took it seriously, but it didn't have the kind of like massive impact it could have had or maybe should have had. And that was because it came a little bit slower than we expected, as it often happens. And what has changed are a number of things. So the fourth industrial revolution is definitely still there. Like Chat GPT-3 is a great example. Like there will be a lot of customer support jobs that will go away, and lots of other jobs for that reason alone. But there are also all the other ones we talked about: self-driving cars, self-driving long-distance trucks, lots of these things. But other things emerge as a product of that. You suddenly need a new kind of mechanics to change the components of the self-driving trucks. So you need welders to build the new kinds of heating systems and electricity systems we need due to the consequence of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And the third thing, of course, is the post-COVID Great Resignation, where I haven't seen the U.S. numbers, I haven't seen a U.S. report of the same kind, But in Denmark, I came across one recently where 1/3 of the labor force has quit their jobs. And 1/3 of the labor force, meaning half of the rest, have actually been involved in trying to catch up, either patching up for the people who've left or onboarding the new people who've just joined their organization, which means that 2/3 of the Danish labor force has been somewhat stifled in the post-COVID Great Resignation. So these three things combined, a war on European ground that has impacted the rest of the world, COVID with subsequent supply chain and manufacturing crisis, and a fourth industrial revolution that has been there all the way through, but is now really picking up speed, is a perfect storm for making this really real and really fast.
That perfect storm has occurred just to the point when there's a combination of cheaper computing power, smarts around that, the ability to really understand things like large language models, which have been nascent. They've been undercover for a long time. And the reason why we're talking about ChatGPT being the result of GPT-3 is that, well, there have been iterations beforehand. Of course, GPT-4 will come down the road. So this is not the first time, but the perfect storm has occurred just at the moment when I think probably the environment is ready to look at this stuff. Now, I do the Global Sentiment Survey in learning. 2 or 3 years ago, we had a surge in interest in AI, analytics and data and so on. Then it went away. This is what always happens. A surge in interest and it dies away. What's happened this year is there has been an enormous surge in re-interest in it. It's really noticeable that people have suddenly got interested in this all over again, in a quite remarkable, unprecedented way. So it's matter of interest. It's in the press. It's all around us. What does it mean then? And by the way, everybody, while Ulrik and I are chatting, there are 2 boxes here. We've got general chat. Love to have your general thoughts there. Also questions. So please feel free to put in either box, and we're going to pick those up as we're talking, and also we'll pick it up at the end as well. But very much wanting your input as well. We've got 117 people in the room. Would love to get your thoughts, sharing it, make it as buzzy as possible. We all benefit when we hear from each other. So the change is happening now. What does that mean for learning, Ulrik? Is this the year? Because it's in January. Is this 2023? Is this the year when everything changed and it's the year of AI?
I think one of your colleagues said the other day that the answer to that question is always no.
That's right, Andrew.
Unless you can prove it otherwise. And I think there is a good chance that the answer is no. We actually don't know. Because as we're often a little bit too trigger happy to predict that this is the year for a certain technology. One thing that is sure is it is the year for the undercurrent changing, which means that it's not going to be 10 years. It's not going to be even 5 years. This is something that is really real, because companies will not be able to get the people they need. There will be plenty of hands out there, but not of the kind we need. And we cannot wait for the traditional educational systems to change. They're like not a super tanker or an aircraft carrier. They're the entire fleet of the world that needs to change direction. And that's not going to happen fast enough, which means that, in my opinion, I am, as you mentioned, working on a trade book with Tony Wagner, who's been describing the problems in education for his entire career. And we're now trying to describe the solutions and the possibilities and the hope. And we have interviewed, I think, a couple of hundred people who actually knows what they're doing or are in positions where they're dealing with this every day. And it's really, really clear that this is something where companies will fundamentally have to change their approach to learning, because otherwise they won't be able to do their business. And the only, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, and of course I'm biased having worked on the core technology for it for years, but I have not seen anything else that gives us a chance to do this fast enough than meeting people where they are, starting from there and then closing the gap, rather than trying to build a new cathedral of education where it takes forever to get people through. You have to find something that is radically better, maybe not an order of magnitude, but it needs to be 2 or 3 times as efficient as what we've done before. And the only thing that has shown those promises is personalization. And it's not surprising, because if you look at my old field of medicine, which is the improvement you can get if you treat patients one by one, as opposed to taking 20 patients in and then writing 1 prescription for all of them. Like, 1 prescription for all of them is not going to be a good idea. I think everybody will laugh at that, but that in some ways is what we are doing in education. So I think that of course, personalization or precision education or whatever we would call it as long as we get to the first step of this, which is we begin to meet people one by one way or the other, that will help. And then you could ask a natural question to ask, come on, why have we not done this before? But if you have to do it with humans, it's cost prohibitive.
Sure.
And that's where these new technologies that are also causing the problems are also part of solving it. Not GPT-3 or not ChatGPT, but the other kinds of intelligence technologies that we've known about for a little bit longer are actually part of the solution.
Can you just give us, because this is quite high level, it's fascinating. Can you give us an example of how Area 9 Lyceum has used this personalized approach to help people learning? If you can give us a couple of examples, one maybe the hands-on skill and one with something that is more knowledge-based, would that be possible, just very quickly?
Yeah, I can do this, the hands-on one fast. That's actually, you don't need intelligence for that one. You need learning engineering. And that requires that the practical implication for that is that companies will have to get learning engineers on board, people who can take skills apart and put them back together again in the heads and hands of their employees. And that's not a trivial thing. That's exactly the same as when you hire a chemical engineer to build a new chemical factory. You don't hire chemists to do that. You hire chemical engineers to build that. And you need the same kind of skill set in companies to be able to handle the skills part in the future. We build the tools for the learning engineers. So the AutoCAD of skills design, that's where we focus our time. On the knowledge side, it's different, and knowledge will still be probably 90% of where we spend our time in the future. And for some people that will be discouraging, because with Google and all sorts of other things, why is that not going down? It's going up because the role of humans is going to more and more be the integrator of knowledge with other things. This thing where we can jump super fast between different things, not finding the specific solution to a problem, but being able to combine different fields. And that means that we as humans, and it's only gone in one direction since the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, we have had to store more and more in our brains and being able to manage it in an agile and dynamic fashion. And that's going to continue, despite all these other things. And a great example of that was that Boris Saxberg, whom some of you will know, one of the best learning engineers in the world and learning scientists, he asked the Google search team themselves whether they could solve a specific problem, and he gave them quite a bit of time. And after a while, they realized so even Google was not able to help them with the answer to that problem, and that requires real math skills to be able to do it. So I think that the big opportunity and the big thing for adaptive learning and the way you do that is you change the way computers treat people individually. In other words, it's e-learning on steroids in some ways, where what happens to you is being shaped, the tracks are being laid in front of you based on how you learned in the past and where you need to go.
And also the tracks are laid on the basis of how other people have learned in the past en masse and what the average is. We've got a great question from Thomas, but I like that question about an example for education, but I'm going to hold on to that for the end. I think that might be quite a substantial discussion, but yeah, thank you for asking it. You gave me an example some time ago about, was it street cleaners in Denmark, and you were helping them do or was it putting up street signs? I can't remember. Helping them do their job better. And it struck me as being something that was very unlike the normal way we get examples around the use of AI in learning. And it was about exactly, sorry, yeah. Can you remember that one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so we actually also do it in the US together with the National Safety Council. It's an interesting problem that whenever we drive our cars, we forget that those street signs are not placed in a random manner. And if they were placed in a random manner, it would get really dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's actually it's a high criticality problem to teach people that, because often you have to teach it to the guys in the blue overalls who, for the majority of the day, are shoveling asphalt. But they have to learn something quite complicated, which is to diagnose the work they're doing and prescribe a placement of the signs that actually directs traffic in the right way. And that's a problem all over the world. And this is particularly interesting because the case we have in Denmark is they've tried for decades to see how they solve this problem, because they have the civil engineer responsible for the entire highway construction in the same room, taking the same certification as the guy who still has asphalt under his nails. And what we now see is that the people who are going through personalized training can actually get there. But the difference is it doesn't take them the same amount of time. The civil engineer gets there faster because he has a better foundation to start from. But the point in the future is, doesn't matter. It's okay that it takes longer for the guy in the blue overalls because he only has to do it once a year. So it's okay that the variable is now the time it takes, but the constant is the proficiency level everybody gets to.
I love that. The end point is the same. People get there with different routes and take different time getting there. And thanks to personalization, that's possible for it to happen. Otherwise, the civil engineer would be madly bored, or the guy with asphalt under his fingernails is struggling to keep up, typically.
There is an interesting question actually from Nora, which is close to this, because malicious, or at least misuse of AI. Malicious is one thing. We haven't seen a lot of malicious examples. We have seen some really clumsy ones where you try to base things on populations, and then suddenly you get the same examples where AI misinterprets things the same way as they misinterpret a black man's face for being a monkey or a gorilla. Like, that kind of stuff is completely unacceptable and unethical, but usually they're not malicious, and the early ones we've seen have been uninformed and clumsy. But there are actually some that are much more interesting and of professional interest, which is what happens if AI actually makes education efficient. And we have seen this problem for years. Like, we can build algorithms, or we can build AI tools that actually forces you or ensures that you learn what we are trying to teach you. But what could be the downside of that? What if we actually have a naive idea about how much capacity you have to learn? Which means we can build systems that become so efficient that they're driving the learners nuts, or even driving them out of efficiency that way. So if we're not intelligent about what we are trying to accomplish, now that we suddenly have tools that work, like, it's not too dangerous to have a completely dull knife because it can't even cut your skin. But the second you get a razor blade or a scalpel, you need to be careful what you try to cut. And therefore, these technologies have a completely unprecedented efficiency. So we now need to also talk about, what are we even trying to teach? What are we even trying to get people to learn?
It is fair that we haven't seen malicious use of AI yet, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't happen. And to take a slight twist on what Nora was asking, how can we be savvy about being aware of when, for example, a text is presented, or you've got a fake video with a fake but realistic voice over it, which apparently is saying one thing? How can we make sure people are savvy to the possible misuses of AI and are, if you like, wary about that very sharp knife?
So I think that's part of the general education that we as humans need to get. We need, and this is a good example of why history education probably shouldn't go away, because critiquing sources is one of the few general things you learn in history. But it's so critically important in the modern environment that if we think that you can learn everything in math, you don't learn this in math, because you won't be able, with a mathematical equation, to figure out if that picture is real or not. You have to use common sense. Or you have to use your background to be critical. So critical thinking is one of these 21st century skills that we have to learn and derive from all the other things we do. So I think that this is a strong case for general education in the future, but it may be in another way than we've done it in the past.
And also a culture where that level of expertise, or that level of critical thinking, is expected, rather than we take things at face value, which probably has been the case up till now. We have a sort of script. Michelle is married to a history teacher and agrees with you on critical thinking. I'm married to a historian. I have a daughter who's studying ancient history, and I completely agree, Michelle. Yes, I think history is a great underrated skill/knowledge base. Listen, we've got a lot of questions coming in, or there are a bunch of things we were going to talk about, but we've got some great questions. Should we jump onto the questions and deal with those?
Sure.
So I want to talk about, Thomas has asked a couple of questions, but let's talk about this second question here. How should we be dealing with knowledge ourselves? Now, we've talked about this. We know that you mentioned it earlier. You didn't use the word, but synthesis is what human minds are going to use in the future to get the best value out of AI and to live in a world where automatons do a great deal of drudgery. We use the fabulous facility of the brain to pull things together from different fields that an algorithm can't connect. That's what we can do. So that's what we should be doing with knowledge ourselves. But Thomas says we have knowledge, we have information overflow on one side, and the other side we've got information at our fingertips. What's the future of human knowledge, and how do we find the balance? So, very big question, Thomas. Ulrik, we could spend the rest of the morning discussing it, but in a couple of minutes, what's our role with knowledge as humans?
So I think we those of us who've already gone through school, we will have to tackle this problem differently than many of us have done in the past. Like, we will probably have to move from we are absorbing knowledge for permanent storage and usage to we have to live with the fact that things are constantly changing, that there is knowledge and skills inflation or deterioration at a faster pace than before. So we have to continue to consume and absorb knowledge and putting it together in meaningful ways, rather than going to school and then you get a job and then you apply that knowledge for many years to come. So this, I don't think it's completely foreign. I think this is something that has snuck in over the last 20 years and probably won't be a shock. I think it will be emphasized and increased and accentuated for sure.
Is there not some knowledge which is timeless?
Of course, and there are also skills that are really important. I think, and I think that the process, your capacity to absorb knowledge needs to increase, and to consume knowledge needs to increase. But we've also shown that that's possible. Like, if you work with deliberate practice, which is one of the most efficient methods out there, that's something you find in the past you found among top performers. This is something we know now we can teach normal learners. Like, we can make them twice as fast and twice as accurate in a matter of few months to know what they don't know. Like, and the realization of understanding where your gaps are is one of the biggest catalysts of learning. It's as simple as this. Think about if you have an automatically driving, autonomously driving car. If it can twice as fast and twice as accurate find out that it's about to get off course, if it can correct that much faster, it's completely intuitive that will help. And that's what we've been working on for 20 years. That's been my main interest, is how fast can we get learners to realize that they're not where they want to be or where they need to be, because that will actually give you that necessary information to get back on track. And as opposed to the self-driving car, humans are pretty good at when they realize they have a gap to intuitively try to close it. So therefore, it's a little bit of a roundabout way to solve that very big problem. And what we've seen is that when you use systems of this kind, you can get to full proficiency on average twice as fast, despite the fact that you have the new final parameter that everybody needs to get to full proficiency, which means when you do these surveys or you do these statistics, that includes the people who spend 10 times longer than the slowest learners, who still get to full proficiency, and the fastest learners who still get to full proficiency.
So we're talking about more than one thing there, one of which is the actual having systems in place which will enable people to learn. But the other is also, you're talking about giving people the realization and the desire to take action there as well. I'm going to park that thought for the second. I think it's very important. We've got two chats going on. In the main chat, general chat, we've got something about the educational system. On the left hand side, we've got a series of questions. Happy for both to be running. I'm going to pull stuff out of the questions for Ulrik. I want to look at what Michaela is asking here about. I think it's a critical / skeptical view of AI. It appears to me that Industry 4.0 calls for people with different knowledge that we need to be on the train is not convincing for me. So can you make a case that the world you're describing, Ulrik, is the real world which we're heading towards, of more automation, and also one that is, I'm going to say, desirable, or perhaps that we can make it desirable if we do the right thing, particularly in the world of learning and skills?
So I think to a wide extent, I actually agree with Michaela's underlying skepticism. Is AI really that important for us? Well, so I think it is really impactful in the sense that there are some real consequences of AI that will happen come hell or high water. But I don't think that AI is that thing that will completely transform education in itself. I think the points that Michaela is bringing up about the interpersonal skills, all these other things will become so much more important from a relative point of view like are relative to all the other things. In the past, you could have education programs that were 100% knowledge based and that you could check with a multiple choice test. In the future, you'll have to figure out, how do we build education programs where you develop situational awareness, where you can problem solve for your colleagues. And that's a very, very different approach, and AI will not solve that problem. The kinds of AI we have now are solving a very limited number of problems in the world. The reason why it's getting the kind of attention it does now is that we're suddenly seeing some applications that are very close to ourselves. It can talk. That's a very human thing. We're suddenly close to something where we think that if it can talk, it must be able to do all other human things. It won't.
No.
Like, it's a very specific kind of problems that this can address. Some of them are relevant for education, but most of them are pretty boring. This is something that will help us make better programs and spend less effort on the old school stuff than we did in the past. And hopefully that can free up the resources to address the things that I think Michaela is advocating will be important and that I agree with.
By the way, on that business of talking, I think it's a very, I think, and we'll come now, I think, to that question about Andrea's asking, what's Ulrik's opinion on Andrea is saying the site chat.openai.com, which is the site for ChatGPT. That site where you put in some information, you give it a cue, a hook, and it generates text as a result. It appears to be incredibly intelligent, but it isn't intelligent. It's a large language model which is producing answers based on prompts that you give it, and it can give you answers which are completely wrong. It can't synthesize in the way that human beings can. So near me on the road, there's a set of railings that have been cut down. There are just the stumps of railings in the ground. I said to OpenAI chat, why are these stumps in the ground? Now, with a bit of external knowledge, you would know that that was because the railings were removed in the Second World War to be melted down. It didn't know that, and it wasn't able to respond because it hadn't been fed that information. And it has other ways in which it's not intelligent, but it appears intelligent because it's very articulate, it expresses things very clearly, and it has a lot of sources of information. So you say very clearly here, Ulrik, it does one thing, it does it very well, but it doesn't mean it's going to answer all our problems. So I think this is why everyone's talking about AI at the moment. But is it like a Sorry, firstly, let me ask you the question. What's your opinion of the website? Then let me go on to the ramifications of it. So what's your opinion of the chat GPT that we're seeing at the moment? Everyone's getting very excited about.
Well, so the same way as with the early GPT-3, you're blown away by the examples that work.
Yeah.
And you can easily see what are the direct ramifications for the jobs that need that. That's easy.
Yeah.
I think the second part is then, okay, so where are the boundaries? And our CTO mentioned an example recently that I was shocked about. He says, there's no, try to get ChatGPT to help you walk into a random house and make a cup of coffee. It's not going to happen. That's a problem that is so far beyond what will happen with these kind of technologies, and we don't have a good suggestion for how this can happen in the future. Because what ChatGPT can do is related to the things where you scan large language-based models, and is really the next, GPT-3 was made to prove the scaling theory, meaning the more money you pour into these, the better they get, and they proved that really well. So we know that these models will become better and better and better. But of this kind, it will be able to write text, but the same way as you still don't have anything close to something that can write a business plan for you, get a new idea. But it is wildly efficient that you have spell check, you have grammar check. It can help you lay out your slide deck for your business plan. All these kinds of things it will help with. So I don't think it will completely be that computers are taking over the world and singularity will make everything implode in 1 second. But I think that we will have a wildly more efficient system. We just need to grow with it. But I think the immediate thing is that a lot of real people will lose their jobs.
Of course. And, there are a number of jobs which involve putting one word in front of another that tool right now can solve. And by extension, in the near future, that will spread. It reminds me of the Jacquard loom in the 18th century, when the mechanical business of putting together lace in such a particular way was suddenly rendered utterly useless in a matter of just a few years by having it automated. It was the first case of major automation, and the result was people losing their jobs, families plunged into poverty in the United Kingdom as a result of this. So people will lose their jobs as a result of this. Just taking a step back from general rather than the field of learning, in that case, what can people do to make sure their jobs are better insulated against the shocks of AI and losing the next job that they get to?
That's a good question. I'm tempted to say that don't try to block a tsunami. Figure out how to avoid the consequences. I think that the most important thing we all should be doing is how do we learn in a way that is compatible with the changes that are happening, because we have been through this before. Like, this is not new. It's just the pace by which it happens that will increase. So there are very few secretaries left who are typewriting letters for the CEOs or even anybody in the company. That changed, and we figure out a way to deal with it. And a lot of the people who had those jobs in the past, they have different jobs today. But I think that what it requires is, and over time we'll find an equilibrium. I think the point that a lot of us are trying to make right now is we've in the past had enough time that we could fix this by doing it through at least the higher ed system. This will happen too fast for that.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that today, that companies are fighting to get employees. We see increased wages that have caused a massive inflation, like all sorts of stuff that is happening over a very short amount of time. And the economists are saying things are potentially out of control. And we can feel this. Our clients in the corporate world in the US have slowed down because they're fighting fundamental problems with supply chain and labor and other things. They're not investing in the future the same pace as they did before. So if that's the case, then the companies will benefit. The companies that can figure out how are we able to shape our own labor forces? How can we kind of like mold the people we're getting in? How can we get good at this, better at this than our competition? Suddenly you have the same advantage as if you can use robotics in your assembly line, or lean manufacturing, or all the other things that we've seen in the past, that some companies have decided to say, let's do things differently. And learning engineering and learning science and using these modern approaches to this is definitely one of the most promising one.
On our high road, we had a big store on the corner, which was Blockbuster, effectively, and then it became a car phone warehouse, and then it became a DVD store. It is now dentistry. Okay, I've never seen a dentistry on the high road before. It's always on a back road, but this is on the high road because you know what? They can afford the rent there, and that's a thing you can't automate. You can't do it remotely, and you can't do it with AI. Now, I have lots of tools to support it, which are data-driven, but ultimately you have to be there physically present in order to do it. It's the same way in many high streets if it's a growth of tattoo parlors for the same reason. So there are some jobs which involve physical work, which are never going to be changed. Other works involving synthesis, which are never going to be changed. So I would say if we can train our kids in particular to have an eclectic, wide view of the world and pull things from different places and revel and enjoy synthesis, I think that's probably the best safeguard for the future for them. Frank's got a skeptical question. So the main argument, a time saving for AI courses, how is this proven in practice? So it's undoubtedly the case that used properly, AI can help people learn faster. He's asking, are there any independent studies around that? Ulrik?
So I think that the main argument is not as much time saving. Time saving is a consequence of how efficient it is. And I'll come back to the proof points for that. I would say that the main argument is that you can get something that resembles, you can get a higher precision of it. You can get higher personalization, which is closer to the doctor treating one patient at a time. And the consequence of that is that it becomes a lot more efficient. So the thing is that you can get a computer to behave intelligently enough that you get closer to the one-on-one situation you have with the doctor and the patient. And that then leads to the second most important thing, even before the time saving, which is that means that we can slow down and wait for the learners who need a lot more time to get to full proficiency, like the asphalt worker in the blue overalls. And the third thing then is, if you then look across all these where we have actually spent a lot more time on some people, that's when we do the studies. And we've done tons of these All of our clients are getting a report that shows this, and it's in the 35 to 50% time savings on average. And we've had college students in the dozens of millions using these tools. Same thing, higher grades, lower dropout rates. But the fundamental thing that leads to this is that we treat them as individuals. Like it's a moving away from treating 20 patients at a time to handling one at a time. That's what AI helps with. AI allows you to build systems that can do that. And it's not because we're particularly clever in the specific subjects. It's this idea, like, how do you get a computer to behave like the infinitely patient teacher who thinks the world of you, who thinks that you can do anything, and therefore keeps trying and trying and trying, and figures out when you get bored, even at the level of this is intelligent enough that when you're getting demotivated, it will lower the pressure on you, make you get some feelings of success so that you keep going. So in some ways you can say that that's like computer games that needs to find the right balance so that you keep going. And that's what AI can really do. But we have quite a lot of evidence and statistics on this. And in higher ed, McGraw has on their website, McGraw-Hill has, I think, 100 studies or more that shows the impact on grades and passing rates.
Frank, thank you for that, Ulrik. Frank, at the end, we're going to throw up a slide which has got contact details and everything, and I would recommend getting in touch with Ulrik. He's going to be very generous about sharing that stuff. I'm a natural, not cynic, but I'm a natural skeptic. I need to be shown stuff and convinced of it. I'm convinced that what I've seen of AI shows the two things that Ulrik is talking about, one of which is that it's fast, but also it's more efficient, so that everybody gets to the end with the level of knowledge or skill that is requested.
But maybe one important caveat here, which is this is not going to happen automatically. You're not going to take a curriculum and just drive it through an AI machine. There are people claiming that can happen right now. There's no proof of that. Yeah. What AI does is that it takes carefully crafted and curated content and can deliver it in a sequence that matters for the individual. So just to be clear, that's where AI has the biggest impact. But everything that has been delivered through the systems I'm referring to is curated and made by humans, aided by AI. When you, for instance, we use AI to come up with suggestions for alternative answers to a multiple choice question, or AI predicts how long will this item take for a learner to get through. It doesn't come up with the idea behind it, and that will take a while before that will happen. So this is an interaction, and this will lead to a whole wave of new jobs. One of our largest partners in the financial space, Citigroup, is training 100 learning engineers right now, and those jobs did not exist before. So this is also going to change and generate a new need, the same way as the technicians who are changing light bulbs on self-driving trucks.
Citi have a fabulous commitment to learning, and it's very good to see it. Daisy asks a good point, so I'd like to use this as a segue to talk about this. ChatGPT does learn a bit about you and asks questions and tailors its answers. She's saying, does this have implications for scaling up intelligent tutoring systems? Let's leave ChatGPT to one side. AI certainly has a role with intelligent tutoring systems. I've seen some which are quite impressive, even a very basic interface, but work very effectively. What's your view about the use of AI to be, as you were saying, not a subject matter expert necessarily, but the infinitely patient teacher or tutor to help guide people in their learning?
So it's back to the same thing, on a sporadic or isolated simple question, to the same way as people are using Google or YouTube to get, I'm sitting here with this problem. Can you show me how to solve this equation? Or can you give me the explanation for why the French Revolution happened? The quality of those answers will improve for sure. So when you have those kind of questions, so the old school tutors you are hiring for your kids, some of those things will be much more available. Some of those answers will become available through automated systems in the future, where you hired a college student to give them in the past. Yes. For the bigger scheme of things, it's not going to happen anytime soon, because there needs to be a thin red line going through what we're doing. And the strategy for what's happening is not even close to something that ChatGPT or other technologies can come up with.
It's a lot of great questions, a lot of great thoughts coming through. Andrew Jacobs says, would it be better to describe ChatGPT as a curation tool? I've asked ChatGPT, actually, Andrew, for the answer to that question. I asked it to describe itself in 20 words, and it said, ChatGPT is a large language generation model trained by OpenAI, which I think is factually correct, but doesn't necessarily tell you very much. Anyway, that's ChatGPT's autobiography. It's definitely not a curation tool, says Michaela. It's described as a stochastic parrot. Right.
There is a fascinating article in the New York Times, or a blog in the New York Times from earlier this week, I think, about some of the limitations of this. We can share that later.
Okay, that would be great. Have you got an article in Forbes as well, which we'll be sharing later on as well? I'm going to go back. I'm just going to, because I'm where there are a couple of things that I wanted to deal with or bring up while we were talking. Adaptive learning. We have touched on this earlier, but I'd like to just come back to, because I do think it's important. We've described, I think, in general terms, some of the impact that AI can have. But can we come back to the business of understanding what people need to learn and taking them down a road that adapts the content we give them, the pace, and so on for them? It's a personalized adaptive delivery, which gets them to the point where they are doing what they need to do. It's not an 80% solution, it's a 100% solution. Can you just take a couple of minutes, Ulrik, to describe that process for us? I think after this general talk about AI and what it can do, I think it's good to focus on a practical deliverable that is actually happening now. Ulrik.
Yeah, so and remember, when we talk about adaptive learning, it only applies to the knowledge domain. Skills is a different beast. Also, the softer skills are the sometimes called power skills, like the 21st century skills. So for the next few minutes, it's only knowledge. So what's important there is that the first step in being able to even do this is that you need very, very granular content. Same way as with the GPS, you need a very granular map of the roads. And you can accept very few mistakes, actually. I live in a part of Boston where there is a road that was closed 15 years ago, and Waze still sends every single Uber Eats and Uber driver through the nearby college, and they're faced with a giant wall of trees that have been there for over 10 years, and they cannot get here. That single thing makes it almost useless, right? So you can accept very, very few mistakes in that content. So the quality of the content model you need to have behind it needs to be really high. And that's where AI actually does help generate that content in some ways. It's not automatic, but it can aid humans doing it. But then the next part is, how do you sequence what's happening? How do you make the decision of what is done for Donald compared to Ulrik? Because we will need very different things. And therefore, the most important thing is to be able to measure, where are we? So if we come back to the self-driving car analogy, the car needs a way to know where it is on the road. And it also needs to be able to realize that it's not where it wants to be. It's two different things. So you build sensor mechanisms in education has often been something we do at the end of it. We see whether the car gets to the point, and then we describe how many that crashed on the way. What personalized learning can do is to secure that you actually get to where you want to go. And because you build in sensor mechanisms that will guide you on the way, your specific route, not a general prescription for everybody who needs to go to work in Boston this morning, but one that is specific for you. And that requires that so what we do in the knowledge domain is we ask a lot of questions. Some of these methods can be translated, and we are translating them right now to skills. It's a very different beast, but the methods can be the same. But you need to find ways where you basically get closed loop on whether the small steps are happening. So those of you who are engineers will know that we talk about closed loop in engineering, closed loop systems. So that means that the car thinks it needs to be here. It measures where am I compared to the edge of the road. If I'm not there, I'm doing a course correction. We do the same in education. We ask you a question as we've done a small step. We ask you a question to find out where you are. We ask you to solve a small problem or do something that gives us a signal back on where you are, where you want to be, or where we're expecting you to be. And if not, we try to see if we can get you back on track. So this very short loops between trying to get people to learn something and checking that it works is not too dissimilar from the grandmother teacher who's infinitely patient, who's constantly looking at your facial expressions, trying to get all signals to make sure that you stay on track. And if not, she will offer you a cup of tea and a cookie and say, hey, let's take a small break and then we continue. But she will come back to continuing, and she will try her best to get you there as fast as possible.
I love that. I'd have a slice of the Christmas cake made by my sister-in-law, which is absolutely fabulous. And I'm slowly getting through it as January progresses. Part of that is an answer to Nick Jones's question, how AI can change the way people learn. I hope that helped you. But I want to come on now to Joanna, who asked, where would you place the role of the gifted teacher who can, this is very much like your grandmother example, intuitively personalized to motivate and to inspire? Will they need to become learning engineers? How will teaching skills, and let's use that widely, educational teaching and workplace learning skills, how will they change, Ulrik?
So I think that we are vastly underexploiting or under benefiting from those gifted teachers today. They teach very, very trivial things, and they are spending a lot of their skills and gifts on something that is totally trivial.
Yeah.
So I think that the challenges we have ahead of us are pretty significant, and we need those teachers. I never advocate building computer only programs. Like when we train learning engineers, and I currently coach five trainees, and I communicate with them every day. And even though they're very committed and they're doing really great, the human touch of saying this is really good, like this is great progress. There are a few things we need to work on. Like you can get demotivated so fast. And yes, if you get that from a computer, it won't matter the same way as if it comes from a human. So I think that there is a really important interpersonal thing we can underestimate, and it was proven in Barack Obama's campaign. The economists and the social economists, I think, showed that an effect that was unheard of, that if you committed to another human, even if it was on the phone, you were more likely to vote compared to if they sent you mails, or even if you committed in writing that you were going, or on a survey that you were going to vote. The fact that you have said it to another human was something that actually brought up the voting percentages that eventually led to his election. So this is something that we can never underestimate, this interhuman aspect of this. Talking to a GPT-3 or having a chat GPT nurse that tells you, don't worry about it, it will be okay. Your cancer diagnosis is not so worrying. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. It's never going to be the same as the nurse holding your hand saying nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really take the point about gifted teachers being undervalued and underused, and I think a lot of people that will resonate with. I think we probably all know, I certainly know people for whom that is the case, and who are no longer in the teaching profession as a result. And there will always be a role for those people. In fact, you could say that the role of AI can take over a lot of the mundane activities and hopefully support them in using that activity more. Andrea asks, we're considering using AI tools to provide pre-course preparation for our engineers. What are the risks going forward for taking up AI more instead of using trainers or teachers? I suspect you're going to say use AI and teachers and trainers. Ulrik.
Yes, the same way as why would you disable spell check in Word? Like really dumb. If you've made a mistake, why would you not have it help you? So take all the help we can get, and then add we have so much human capacity on top of that. So use AI, use technology anywhere it can help, but it's not going to take teachers out of their jobs. It may take teachers out of some of their jobs. I don't think I've met a few teachers who are saying that they really enjoy sitting in their armchair correcting handwritten student responses, but I think they're a rarity.
Come on, Ulrik, have you met anybody who enjoys marking homework? Seriously?
Yes, I have.
Really?
Unfortunately, met a few.
Okay.
And I'm shocked every time it happens. I'm like flabbergasted, being like, "Are you seriously? Where's the hidden camera?" But I met one within the last year in London. Right. So it does unfortunately happen still. But I think they're a rarity. The most motivated teachers I've ever met, the teachers who are changing kids' lives, are the ones who are creating new learning opportunities, who are letting the kids free to do projects, who are bragging about the crazy project their fourth graders were doing. Those teachers are the ones we need to stimulate and build growth spaces for in the future.
And create opportunities for people. And it doesn't have to be the opportunity of going to some fancy university. It could be the opportunity of one teacher I know who was walking down the high street, woman rushed out of a shop and said, "Thank you for teaching me. I now have a job." And that was it. Looking at the clock, looking at everything else, trying to keep track of everything. Tanya asks, can you speak a little more to the interdisciplinary skills needed for an agile workforce, and the need for continuous and lifelong learning outside university and the workplace. Now, you have mentioned this, but I think it's pretty important. Do you feel applications of AI are lagging behind in non-traditional, non-degree providers? I'm not quite sure where that takes us, but let's talk about the general use of supporting, of the interdisciplinary skills for an agile workforce and helping people develop themselves after they leave university.
So I think there are some very general ability to learn skills and 21st century skills of other kinds. So critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. Some of these things that are very human things that we're not likely to see anytime soon being automated. Those things are the general and often interdisciplinary skills and things that can almost only be acquired in interdisciplinary environments. So one of the things that is interesting is what happens if we are to do learning engineering and try to shape these skills? We almost always come back to we have to do different things, and we often have to do them together. We often have to find the answers to these things. Communication is something that is often learned from learning to solicit feedback, receiving feedback without being offended, incorporating feedback. Tony deleted a page and a half from my manuscript for a chapter the other day. And you can have two attitudes, which is, I lost the time it took to write those page and a half. Or I could listen to him and say why his criticism was right. And the natural inclination is probably to feel like, why is he destroying my work? As opposed to, did he actually focus it and take out something? And he had a phenomenal point, and of course he was right that we should kill it. So I think that the interdisciplinary skills, the collaborative learning is something that is necessary. But the big headache is, how the heck do we find the time for it? What is it we need to do differently in the workplace? Because we have so little time for real learning, because we have to do our real job. So I think the first one is we may have to define what our real job is in the future.
Absolutely.
I think I have had a hard time with some of my current and particularly former team members who are saying, but we don't have time for 2 hours of learning every week because we have to do our real job. And I'm telling them, and they will know, I know a couple of them are here. They will know that, no, it is your real job to learn. Yeah. You cannot be part of this team if you're not learning, because you will be obsolete really fast. But the second part is we have to find ways where we can incorporate it into what we're otherwise doing. We have to begin to learn from the things that we are otherwise doing. We have to learn from the landings the pilots are doing anyway. And this is the difference between deliberate practice and mindless practice and mindless work. Like, we can do our job every day and learning nothing from it. Or we can begin to put a learning lens on everything we do, and therefore derive learning from everything we do.
It's a very powerful case you make, and it may be in the future that a Darwinian principle operates, and the companies which are dedicating work to learning, time to learning, are the ones that survive, and the ones that don't simply can't react fast enough. We're close to the end now. We've got 3 minutes left. It's coming up to 8 o'clock in the morning for Ulrik in Boston. You can see he's been sipping his coffee during the course of this. And not that he needs it, in my experience. Katarina asks, Dear Ulrik, I would like to kindly ask your advice about joining a professional community. Are there any groups or societies where I can get professional advice and mentorship? I think that's a really good piece of advice. I would recommend coming to these webinars for general stuff about learning. Ulrik, is there anything particular about AI? Any resources you'd point people towards?
Not specifically to AI, but I would hang out more with you if you can find a way to do that. There are not many fora where we actually have these discussions where it's not a matter of buying one thing rather than another, or where we can do this. I think one of the things that happens also at Learning Technologies is we actually do get a chance to meet, and there are a bunch of networks, and often they're closed and by invitation only. But I would say, like, that's the best thing. But more importantly, join a company that is interested in education. Like, make sure, like, people don't leave their job, they leave their boss. But in the future, they should leave their company if they don't invest in learning, and not learning as a company benefit or employee benefit. It shouldn't be a fringe benefit. It should be something that is integral to the strategy. And a friend of mine, a CLO of a very large financial institution, said that he was shocked to see that how large corporations have a huge difference in who the CLO reports to. And it was totally correlating with how important I gauged it for that organization. The more an organization appreciates that real learning needs to happen, or real mastery needs to be accomplished, the closer the CLO is to the CEO.
And otherwise, it's parked underneath somewhere else as a transactional activity, which is a kind of have to do rather than a want to do.
Or let me pay for the education somebody else should have paid for. Let me send you to college. I think that's going to go away really fast. That's not what companies should do.
Although still, there will always be a market, sadly, for a badge or a certificate if it comes from the right institution. We've got 1 minute left. I'm going to ask you a final question from Sune Gams, who's been waiting for this one. Any thoughts on how we can improve health coaching with AI? For example, you've got diabetes, obesity, it may be a very personalized issue. Will that come in the future?
Yes, in some ways, yes, for sure. Some of these things, like patients show up way more prepared than they've ever been before, but it also leads to some really funky consultations between physicians and their patients. It's a plus and a minus. I think it will definitely improve. I think that our compliance technologies, we've actually invested in one some years ago that is working on how do you get patients to actually comply with what they really would benefit from. But this is still very much an interpersonal thing. It will improve. Physicians will definitely benefit, and the health system will benefit from these technologies. But a large part of it is still around educating healthcare professionals who can engage with humans to humans skills.
That isn't necessarily part of the curriculum in the medical profession, is it? Unfortunately, this has been. I hope you'd agree, everybody in the room. I hope you'd agree. This has been a really exciting discussion. I always enjoy a chat with Ulrik, and it's always the case that I learn a lot. We've collected some of the resources that people have suggested during the course of it over on the left-hand side there. And at the bottom is my global sentiment survey, which, by the way, is saying that AI is absolutely going mad this year and everyone wants to know more about it. Everyone, thank you very much for staying with us on a busy start to the year. As always, there's always a lot to do. Really enjoyed having you with us and your participation. But the big thank you has to be to Ulrik Juul Christensen of Area 9 Lyceum for bringing that wealth of knowledge, a really sharp intellect, and a sense of humor to a really important topic. It's not going to go away. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more over the course of the year. So I'd recommend following Ulrik on LinkedIn, reading that article of his in Forbes, and staying in touch for a guy who knows what he's talking about. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to close, usher you out of the doors. Ulrik, is there anything else you'd like to say just as people are leaving?
Thanks so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye for now.